I'm Rachel Weston, 35 years old, and when I stepped into the wedding reception in full military dress, all 4 stars polished and gleaming, the room went silent. I wasn't supposed to be there. Not on the guest list, not in the family slideshow, not in the picture-perfect life my parents had curated around Delilah. But there I stood, right as my father raised his champagne glass, pretending I didn't exist until I did. Their favorite daughter was marrying a man they worshipped for his business connections. They didn't know what I knew, not yet, and that was about to change before I go any further. Let me know where you're listening from in the comments. And if you've ever stood your ground in front of people who once shut you out, hit like and subscribe for more stories. Like this one, I grew up in Portland, Oregon, in a house that sat high above the city. In the West Hills, our backyard overlooked the skyline. Our mother hosted wine fundraisers in heels and pearls while our father shook hands with men who signed million-dollar deals at golf clubs. Their legacy was business and control. And from day one, my sister Delilah fit into that world like a custom-tailored glove. I didn't. Delilah was charming. Even as a little girl, she understood when to smile and when to agree. She joined the right clubs, wore the right dresses, memorized our father's talking points. I was quieter, more curious, drawn to order and service when other girls dreamed of weddings. I was researching flight school and folding my ROTC uniform with pride. I still remember how my mother reacted the day I came home in that uniform for the first time. She looked at me like I had tracked dirt across her marble floors. "Military service is so ordinary," she said, placing the word with a wince, like it didn't belong in her house. "We don't follow orders in this family, we give them." Our father doubled down the night. I told them I'd been accepted to the Air Force Academy. "You have Ivy League options, Rachel," he said, cutting his steak with perfect control. "Your grandfather built this family's name and you want to throw it away for a base salary and some stripes." Delilah said nothing that night. She stared at her plate while I packed the next morning alone. Only Aunt Marjorie came to see me off. My parents stayed inside. Delilah sent a text. "Good luck. I just can't upset them." Over the years, every visit home felt smaller, every accomplishment dismissed. When I made lieutenant colonel, they told friends I worked in government. Never said the word Air Force. Delilah, on the other hand, climbed quickly in the family business. She joined our father's firm right after grad school. She hosted galas. She wore designer. She dated men who looked good on paper by the time I transitioned into military intelligence. Our conversations were down to holiday texts. The gap wasn't just emotional anymore, it was strategic. My work began to touch edges of defense contracts and export regulations, and my father's firm held quiet investments in some of those very companies. There was one dinner I'll never forget. I brought up ethical concerns about a weapons firm linked to sales in embargoed countries. My father set his glass down and said, "You've been listening to propaganda." His face turned red and the table went quiet. I later learned his firm had shares in that same company. The last time I tried to share good news, I'd just been promoted to colonel. My mother sighed into the phone, still chasing uniforms and danger. "Delilah just bought a condo in the Pearl District. You could have had that life if you'd stayed on the right path." "Then," she said, "you know she's seeing Hunter Collins now, the VP at Stratton Defense. Now he has a future. That was the last time we really spoke after that. I only heard updates through Marjorie. She told me when Delilah and Hunter got engaged. No call from Delilah, no message from our parents. And when I saw Hunter's name come across a classified defense brief, a few weeks later I felt my stomach tighten. The wedding date came to me through Brady, my cousin, the only one who still spoke to me like family." "You're not going?" he asked. I told him I wasn't invited. He paused. "I thought I assumed, Rachel. She's your sister." I called Delilah that night. I didn't plan to, but I did. She picked up on the third ring and sounded, "Tired Mom didn't tell you it's mostly Dad's guest list anyway. Business partners. Hunter's colleagues. You know how it is." She said she didn't want tension, that my presence might upset the flow of things she was swamped with planning. "Maybe we could grab coffee after the honeymoon?" I asked if she was happy. She answered too quickly. "Of course. Hunter's perfect. Dad says he's headed for COO. She never said what she thought, only what Dad thought, and when I offered to take leave to be there, she cut me off. You understand." Right, I didn't, but I said I did, and I hung up the phone. not knowing that within weeks my sister's name would show up in places it never should have. I didn't hear from Delilah again for nearly 3 weeks. Not a text, not a call. No forwarded invite, no mention from anyone in the family. Then Brady called on a Tuesday evening, his voice hesitant, like he already knew something was wrong. "I thought you knew," he said. "The wedding's at the Montclair Ballroom next month. Mom and Dad are inviting everyone, even folks from the board." I stood in the kitchen holding the phone against my ear, the silence between us filled with everything he didn't say. "You're not on the list?" he asked after a pause. "No," I answered quietly. "I'm not Brady." Let out a breath. "Rachel, I'm sorry. I didn't realize." I thanked him anyway, then stood in my living room staring at the framed photos on the wall, pictures of my unit on deployment, Marjorie and me at a small-town diner, my first flight badge. Delilah's name didn't appear again until it showed up in an intelligence briefing. I was reviewing procurement summaries when I noticed a familiar company name, Stratton Defense, listed under contracts, recently flagged for irregularities. Nothing definitive, but enough to raise concern. At first I didn't make the connection. Then I saw Hunter's name listed as the overseeing executive. The contracts were tied to foreign tech transfers approved through unusually fast channels with vague reporting trails. A week later, a second report surfaced, this time from another agency, showing cross-border financial movement through shell companies. Hunter's name came up again, always adjacent, never directly responsible, but close. Enough. That night, I sat at my desk rereading every line I kept thinking about our father's firm, about his long history with private defense contracts. I picked up the phone, dialed Delilah's number. It rang 3 times before she answered. "Rachel." "I heard about the wedding," I said calmly. "From Brady, not from you." "She didn't speak right away. I wasn't sure you'd want to come," she said eventually. "You and Dad barely speak, and Hunter, it just felt complicated. It's not about the complications." I said, "It's about being your sister." "Rachel," I tried. Her voice cracked. "I really did," she said. She'd told Dad she wanted me there, that she thought it was wrong to exclude me. "What happened?" I asked. Though I already knew. He said if I invited you, the wedding was off funding, pulled venue, canceled everything. My throat tightened. "What did Mom say?" "She told me choosing you over them would come at a price." I asked what Hunter thought. He said it was best to keep the peace. Her voice was smaller now, unsure. "I'm not strong like you." After we hung up, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table thinking about Delilah in that house with Mom, smoothing her hair, and Dad shaking hands with men like Hunter. I reached out to a colleague at the Justice Department. Not an official move, just a quiet check-in. Someone I trusted. "There's chatter." She said Stratton might be under deeper review. Hunter's on our radar, but nothing's public yet. I asked if his name had come up on anything recent. She paused, then answered, "Yes, more than once." The next day I started looking deeper, not through official channels, but through the resources I had access to. I found travel records linking Hunter to meetings with foreign buyers in neutral territories. Emails that used coded language but suggested movement of restricted tech. Then something I didn't expect: corporate documents from 2 years ago, showing a shell company tied to both Stratton and a private investor group linked to my father's firm, and listed on the filing as a board member was Delilah. I stared at the screen, rereading the line. Her name was there long before she started dating Hunter. I picked up the phone and called Marjorie. She listened without interrupting. He used her name. I said he'd probably told her it was just standard paperwork when she joined the firm. Marjorie was quiet for a moment, then said, "I've seen your father do a lot, but this is something else. I knew I had to do something, but I also knew showing up with files and accusations would get me nowhere. They'd dismiss me as bitter, jealous, unpredictable. I needed to make them listen, and I needed Delilah to see what she was walking into." That night, I made a decision. I pulled my full dress uniform from the back of the closet, pressed every crease, polished every star. I printed documents, labeled timelines, and laid everything out on the table. I contacted Captain Monica Hartwell, an old friend now, at the federal prosecutor's office specializing in arms export violations. "You sure about this?" she asked when I told her what I'd found. "I'm sure this could involve multiple violations," she said. "If your sister's name is tied to those companies, she could be implicated too." "She doesn't know," I told her. "She never read the fine print." She trusted them. I asked for time, just a few days, just until after the wedding. We'll hold off unless we see signs of destruction of evidence or flight risk, she said. But if that happens, we move fast. I thanked her and promised to keep her updated with 3 weeks left before the wedding. I dug deeper. I tracked corporate registrations, matched travel logs with business filings, traced bank transfers from shell accounts into offshore holdings that looped back into Stratton's board members. It was all there, the deals, the movement, the names, and in the middle of it was my father. He had helped Hunter navigate markets in countries under embargo. He'd brokered meetings with foreign investors and built the shell companies needed to cover the trail. And Delilah had been added as a director before she even knew who Hunter was. I sat in my apartment surrounded by paperwork, every piece of it telling the same story. They weren't marrying her off because they adored Hunter. They were tying her to the deal of a lifetime. I called Marjorie again, told her I planned to go to the wedding. They won't let you in, she said. They'll try to stop me, but they can't ignore me if I walk in as Colonel Rachel Weston, not the daughter they disowned. What if they try to have you removed? I'll be calm. I'll be respectful. I'll bring nothing classified, but I'll bring enough the night before the wedding. Marjorie sent me a text. Your mother just called, told me not to mention you at the reception, I replied. I'll be there anyway, she wrote back. Good. I'll be with you. I laid out my uniform piece by piece, checked each medal. Each ribbon arranged the evidence into a secure folder with plain summaries and lawyer contacts in case Delilah needed help. Then I sat on the edge of my bed, remembering us as children playing hide-and-seek in the backyard, her laugh echoing through the trees before the dinners, before the pressure, before the wedge grew so wide I didn't know what would happen the next day. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her walk into a marriage built on lies without knowing the truth. The Montclair Hotel looked like it belonged on the cover of a winter wedding magazine, stone columns wrapped in twinkling lights, orchids spilling out of every arrangement, and valet attendants waiting with umbrellas in crisp black coats. I stood across the street for a while, my uniform coat buttoned tight, the folder tucked securely under one arm. Cars pulled up one after another, each one sleeker than the last. I waited until the last of the bridal party disappeared inside. It was better to walk in during the reception when the toasts would be underway and people would be listening. My goal wasn't drama, it was clarity. The security guard at the front checked a tablet as I approached. Invitation, ma'am. I'm Colonel Rachel Weston, United States Air Force, I said evenly. The bride is my sister. He blinked. I'm not showing you on the list, Colonel. I understand. Please contact your supervisor, I said, handing him my military ID. He made the call, then stepped aside when a man in a tailored gray suit approached. He introduced himself as the event manager. Colonel Weston, I understand there's been a mix-up. There's no mix-up, I said. I wasn't invited. But what I need to share with my sister and her husband affects both their futures and the reputation of this venue if it's ignored. He nodded once, measured and slow. Follow me. The ballroom doors opened just as my father's voice rang out from the microphone. To Delilah and Hunter, a union of families, of values, of legacy. The manager held the door for me. I stepped inside. The room fell quiet in waves. Conversations trailed off. Glasses paused midair, heads turned. My mother sat at the head table, her lavender dress flawless, her smile fading fast. Delilah turned and her eyes locked on mine. Something shifted in her face. Shock first, then confusion, then something gentler. Hunter, seated beside her, went rigid. He recognized me. He would have known my name from agency records and briefings. He had never seen me in person. Until now. I walked slowly toward the head table, my footsteps echoing softly on the polished floor. My father set down his glass with care, but his jaw tightened. Rachel, he said in a low voice, stepping forward to block my path. You're making a mistake. Hello, Father, I replied just loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. Congratulations on Delilah's wedding. I'm sorry I never received the invitation. My mother stood quickly, smoothing her skirt. Rachel, darling, what a surprise. We thought you were deployed. Delilah rose to her feet before either of them could say more. She moved around the table and reached for me, pulling me into a hug. You came, she whispered. She pulled back, her eyes bright. Behind her, Hunter stood watching us with narrowed focus. "Delilah, sweetheart," he said carefully, "why don't you introduce your sister?" My father cleared his throat. "This isn't the time. We can discuss whatever this is in private." "I agree," I said. "Library 5 minutes." Delilah looked between them and then over at the crowd, who were now whispering behind linen napkins and half-lifted forks. "I want Aunt Marjorie there too," she said. My mother flinched. "Delilah, that's not—" "It's my wedding," Delilah said firmly. "If we're having a family meeting, I want all family present." Marjorie was already on her feet, stepping forward with quiet calm. We made our way through the ballroom, Hunter placing a hand on Delilah's back like a guide or a claim. As we walked, he leaned toward me. "What exactly are you trying to do?" he asked without looking directly at me. "This is a private celebration," I said. "You know a lot about private things, don't you, Mr. Collins?" His pace didn't change, but I saw the way his jaw flexed. "You're risking a lot," he said. We reached the library doors. A staff member closed them behind us, muffling the sounds of resumed music and conversation. The room was warm with leather-bound books and a fireplace that had been lit for ambiance. My father turned on me immediately. "You have 1 minute to explain yourself before I have you escorted out." I stepped past him and opened the folder, laying it flat on the nearest table. "These are corporate records," I said, "shell companies tied to both Stratton Defense and Weston Holdings, all routed through offshore accounts. You used Delilah's name on at least 3. Hunter stepped closer, keeping his voice smooth. "I don't know what you think you've found, but showing up at your sister's wedding with conspiracy theories." "These aren't theories," I said, pulling out printed photos. "These are you meeting with intermediaries in Singapore, Geneva, and Dubai. These are payment logs. These are dates. These are export violations." Delilah stood in the middle of the room, her hands at her sides. "What is this?" she asked, her voice low. My mother stepped forward. "It's a distraction. Rachel's always felt Delilah," I said gently. "You signed director documents for 3 of the shell companies linked to these transactions. Do you remember reading any of that fine print?" Her mouth opened, but she didn't answer. My father took a step forward. "She signed onboarding paperwork, standard documents. There's nothing criminal here." I pulled out one last page and slid it across the table. Then I hit play on a short audio clip on my phone. My father's voice filled the room. "The Kuwaiti intermediary is in place. Once it moves through their system, the wedding helps with optics. No one will look too hard at a family gift." My father lunged, but I clicked off the recording before he could grab the device. "Delilah, I said they used your name to push through deals under embargo. If this goes public and you don't act, you'll be seen as part of it." She turned toward Hunter. Did you know I was listed?" Hunter didn't answer right away. "It's complicated," he said. "Your father said it was just for protection." "For protection," she repeated. "You knew." He stepped closer. "Delilah, I never meant to hurt you. This deal, this relationship was never supposed to involve you like this." She looked at her hands, then at the ring on her finger. "How long?" she asked softly. "The first meeting was at the literacy gala he offered. It was an education fundraiser, and I wore a green dress," she said. "You told me it was blue." Hunter hesitated. Delilah took off the ring and placed it in his hand. "If it had been real, you would have told me." My father stepped in again. "You're overreacting. Rachel's framing this to tear us apart." Marjorie stepped forward. "No, she's showing you what's been true for a long time. You just didn't want to see it." Delilah stood in the middle of the room, her dress shifting as she turned to face all of us. "I defended this family for years," she said. "I ignored every warning, but I won't ignore this." She turned to me. "What happens next?" I took a breath. "Federal agents are ready to move. They're waiting only because I asked for time to tell you myself. You're not a suspect. But if you stay silent, you could become one." Marjorie moved to stand beside Delilah. "You can come home with me." My father's voice rose. "If you leave with them, you're cut off. No firm, no funds, no support." Delilah stood still for a moment, then looked over at me. "Rachel, I want to leave now." Hunter reached for her arm. "You can't do this. We're married." Marjorie raised an eyebrow. "Not until the license is filed," which it hasn't been. Delilah stepped toward me. I took her arm steady and quiet, and together we walked out. We stepped out into the cool evening air, the sounds of music fading behind us. Delilah still held my arm, her steps unsteady on the stone path. Marjorie walked ahead, speaking quietly into her phone, arranging for a car to meet us away from the main entrance. No one followed. No one tried to stop us. The car arrived within minutes. Delilah climbed in without a word. I slid in beside her while Marjorie gave the driver an address outside the city. For the first few miles, no one said anything. The quiet wasn't uncomfortable, just full. Delilah stared out the window, her fingers resting on her lap, the ring now gone. When we reached my apartment building, she followed me upstairs. Marjorie helped her settle into the guest room before quietly heading home. I made tea and set it down on the nightstand. Delilah sat on the edge of the bed, still in the wedding dress, her hair starting to fall loose from the pins. She didn't cry. She just looked tired. "I'll get you some clothes," I said. "There's a robe in the closet. Bathroom's across the hall." She nodded slowly, then whispered, "Can you stay for a minute?" I sat beside her, neither of us saying anything more. After a while, she changed and lay down. I closed the door gently behind me. The next morning, Delilah stood in my kitchen barefoot, holding a mug of coffee with both hands. Her eyes were puffy but clear. "I feel like I've been sleepwalking," she said, "and I just slammed into a wall." I poured myself a cup and leaned against the counter. She looked at me and asked, "What happens now?" "I'll call Captain Hartwell today," I said. "Once we move forward, federal agents will open formal proceedings. They'll want to interview you, get your statement." "I'll tell them everything I know," she said quietly. "I didn't read most of what they gave me. I just signed whatever Dad said was standard." "They know that," I said. "You're not the first person to be used like that." Delilah nodded, then took a sip of coffee. The next few days passed slowly. I returned to work temporarily reassigned, while internal review teams confirmed I'd followed proper channels. Delilah stayed in the apartment, helping where she could, folding laundry, cleaning the fridge. Little tasks that gave her something to do with her hands. I came home one evening to find her sitting on the floor with papers spread out around her, documents from the firm, meeting notes, her own laptop open beside her. "I'm writing everything down," she said, "every meeting, every time Hunter used words I didn't understand," and I nodded like I did. She continued working through the night, taking short breaks to pace the living room or rub her temples. She gave the agents everything: names, dates, passwords. She handed over devices, granted access to her email and personal files. The first wave of arrests came just 6 days after the wedding. Hunter was taken into custody at a private hangar just before boarding a flight to the Cayman Islands. My father turned himself in with his legal team present. My mother stayed silent, remaining inside their West Hills estate and refusing interviews. The press caught wind of the arrests before noon. Local headlines carried the story by evening. By morning, it was national. Portland financier and defense executive indicted in arms trade scandal. Smaller outlets picked up the wedding angle. Bride walks out after confrontation with sister, a military officer. Delilah's name wasn't mentioned at first, but eventually it appeared. She handled it quietly, ignoring calls from reporters, declining offers to speak. Marjorie helped move her to a colleague's guest house outside the city for a few weeks. I visited when I could. Meanwhile, my chain of command reviewed every step I had taken. I was cleared after 10 days. Still, they kept me on administrative duties for the time being. Delilah and I met for coffee in a quiet corner cafe 2 weeks later. She wore jeans and a soft flannel shirt, no makeup, her hair pulled back in a loose knot. She looked like herself in a way I hadn't seen since we were teenagers. "I keep thinking about the times I defended them," she said. "How I shut you out, how I sat in rooms and nodded and smiled while they talked about strategic partnerships I didn't understand." I reached across the table and touched her hand. She didn't pull away. "You trusted them," I said. "That's what they raised you to do. But I should have asked more questions. You're asking them now." She looked up at me, her eyes steady. "I want to testify. I want them to know I won't protect them anymore." I nodded. "I'll be there." That night, as I drove her back to the guest house, she told me she'd been offered several interviews and even a book deal. "I don't want it," she said. "Not now. Maybe not ever." She turned toward the window, watching the trees blur past in the fading light. "I don't want this to be who I am." Weeks passed. Indictments became formal charges. More names surfaced. Executives, board members, a web of deals unraveling piece by piece. Delilah spent time with veteran support groups through one of Marjorie's contacts. She helped coordinate outreach events, set up folders, greeted people with coffee and clipboards. No one asked her to explain who she was. She called me one evening after a long day at the center. I met a woman today who lost her husband overseas. She said he died because of weapons that shouldn't have been there. I listened as she took a breath. I finally understand why you did what you did, why you've stayed in this for so long. A pause. I never told you this, but I used to brag about having a sister in the military. I just never said it to their faces. I didn't respond right away, just let the silence settle between us. I'm proud of you, she said, even if I didn't say it when it mattered most. I closed my eyes and let the words land. Later that week, Captain Hartwell confirmed that Delilah would testify as a cooperating witness. In exchange, the charges connected to her name would be dropped. She agreed without hesitation. The night before her first court appearance, she came to my room. She sat at the foot of the bed like she used to when we were kids. I don't know if I'll sleep tonight, she said. You don't have to. We sat there for a while, not saying much, just breathing in the quiet, letting the weight of everything find a place. She looked over at me, her voice soft. What if they never forgive me? You're not doing it for them. She nodded. Still, I hope it matters. It does. When she stood, she hesitated at the door. I'm not scared of the courtroom, she said. I'm scared of seeing Dad. I'm scared he'll look at me like I failed him. I looked up. Then look at me, I said, and remember who you're standing for. She didn't answer. She just nodded once, then went to bed. The next morning, we drove to the courthouse together. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, but in tone. Pale walls, quiet murmurs, and the steady shuffle of papers filled the space. Delilah sat beside Captain Hartwell, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. She didn't look at our father when he entered, though I watched her jaw tighten as he took his place across the room with his attorneys. When they called her to the stand, I saw her hesitate just slightly before standing. One hand brushed against the table as she steadied herself. Then she walked forward, measured, calm, composed. I stayed in the gallery behind the railing, watching her give her statement. She described meetings she'd been asked to attend, documents she'd signed, conversations that hadn't made sense at the time. When the prosecutor asked whether she had known about the illegal transfers, she answered clearly, "No, I didn't." But I should have asked more questions. There was no drama in her voice, no blame, just the truth. Afterward, we waited in the hallway while attorneys argued pre-trial motions. Delilah leaned against the wall, arms crossed, eyes on the floor. When our mother arrived, flanked by two lawyers, she didn't approach. She stood across the corridor, lips tight, eyes scanning the room. Delilah glanced toward her, but didn't move. That night, back at my apartment, we ate soup in silence, the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. She didn't even look at me, Delilah said softly. She saw you, I replied. Not really. The next few days brought a flurry of news reports, analyst commentary, and legal predictions. Delilah ignored them all. She spent time helping Marjorie with university research projects and volunteered twice a week at the Veterans Center. One evening, she came home carrying a worn canvas folder. She spread its contents out on the kitchen table, brochures from local colleges, information on graduate programs, financial aid forms. I'm thinking about going back to school, she said. I looked through the papers. Public administration, social work, nonprofit management. I don't want to spend my life repairing what they broke, she said, but I want to build something different. I nodded. Start wherever feels right. That weekend, Marjorie invited us over for dinner. Delilah wore jeans and a green sweater, her hair in a soft ponytail. She helped set the table and laughed when Marjorie forgot the rolls in the oven. It was the first time I'd seen her laugh like that in months. Halfway through the meal, Marjorie said gently, "Your mother called me." Delilah looked up. Her fork paused over her plate. "She said your father's legal team is hoping for a deal," Marjorie continued, "and she wants you to testify that he was only trying to protect the family." Delilah didn't speak at first. She folded her napkin, then refolded it. "I'm not protecting anyone who used me," she said. She also asked if you'd consider visiting, Marjorie added. Not for court, just personal. Delilah's eyes stayed on the table. I'm not ready. Marjorie nodded once. That's okay. The next morning, Delilah went for a walk around the neighborhood while I organized paperwork for my upcoming reassignment. When she returned, she was holding a small bouquet of flowers and a paper bag of pastries. I ran into someone, she said, placing the items on the counter. Who? His name's Mark, she said with a shy smile. He's a public defender, volunteers at the same center. He recognized me from the case, but didn't bring it up. She paused. We talked about books and coffee and hiking. Did he ask for your number, I asked. He asked if I wanted to go on a hike this weekend, she said. And he invited you too. I raised an eyebrow. He says if he wants to date me, he should meet my sister first. I smiled. Smart man. That Saturday, we met Mark at a nearby trail. The path was quiet, lined with pine and early spring wildflowers. He was kind, attentive, never once bringing up the courtroom or headlines. Delilah walked beside him, listening, asking questions, nodding in that way she used to when she was trying to be polite, but this time it felt real. Afterward, as we sat on a bench with water bottles in hand, she leaned toward me and whispered, I think I might like him. In the weeks that followed, Delilah submitted her first graduate application. She moved into a small apartment near the university decorated with secondhand furniture and a few framed pictures from childhood, only the ones that made her smile. Mark came by often. He brought groceries, helped hang curtains, and once spent 2 hours fixing a shaky cabinet door while Delilah read aloud from a novel she was reviewing for class. One afternoon, she called and asked if I could meet her for lunch. We sat on the patio of a quiet cafe. She pulled out a manila envelope from her bag and handed it to me. I've been thinking about changing my name, she said. Not legally yet, just personally. I opened the envelope. Inside was a simple sheet of paper with one name written in neat handwriting. Delilah Bailey. Bailey, I repeated. Grandma's name, she said. The one who used to send us books with handwritten notes. I smiled. She'd be proud. I want to carry something that connects me to the kind of family I want to be, Delilah said. Not the one I came from. Later that evening, I helped her update her email address and resume with the new name. She moved through the process with quiet determination. That Sunday, Mark invited both of us to his family's cabin for a simple dinner. We drove up together, me in the passenger seat, Delilah humming to the radio, the mountains rising ahead of us. At the cabin, we ate grilled vegetables and roasted chicken. No formal toasts, no performance. Just people sitting around a table, sharing stories and passing food. When we got back to the apartment, Delilah sat on the couch, her legs tucked under her, a blanket over her shoulders. I didn't think I'd feel at home so quickly, she said, but I did. I sat across from her sipping tea. You're building something honest. She nodded slowly, and for the first time in a long while, she looked like someone who wasn't running from the past anymore, but walking steadily towards something new. The indictments were announced just after Labor Day. Hunter was charged with multiple violations of the Arms Export Control Act conspiracy to defraud the government and international money laundering. My father faced similar charges, plus 2 counts of tax evasion. Even my mother appeared on the docket, lesser charges, but charges nonetheless. Delilah's name was nowhere in the paperwork. Her cooperation had earned her full immunity. Still, the days surrounding the announcement were hard. Reporters showed up outside her apartment. Mark walked her to class for a week, shielding her from cameras and whispered questions. She came to my apartment that Friday. We sat on the balcony, a light breeze pushing around the scent of rain. She held a mug between her hands, gaze steady. Do you think I'm doing the right thing? She asked. I didn't answer right away. She looked tired, but clear. I think it's the hard thing, and sometimes that's the right thing. Delilah nodded. I've been thinking about those dinners. The ones where they called your career a waste. All that talk about legacy and image. While they were breaking federal law behind closed doors. She set the mug down. I'm sorry I didn't speak up more. Or sooner. We're here now, I said. That counts for something. Mid-October, the media attention spiked again. Several production companies reached out to Delilah with offers for her story. One proposed a limited docuseries. Another wanted a dramatized courtroom adaptation. She turned them all down. "I don't want to be a headline anymore," she said. "I want to be useful." She started volunteering more frequently at the Veterans Center, sitting with women who were navigating housing applications and healthcare forms. She helped them prepare for job interviews, sometimes loaning out blazers she'd once worn to fundraisers. In early November, she and Mark helped organize a clothing drive. I showed up to lend a hand and found her unpacking donated winter coats from the back of a borrowed truck. She looked different, not just physically. She moved with purpose now, not performance. That night over takeout, she told me about a moment during the drive. A woman came in with her daughter, she said. She was so embarrassed, Rachel. She kept apologizing. And I told her, "You have nothing to apologize for." Delilah wiped her hands on a napkin. And I realized I believed it. I wasn't just saying it to sound kind. I nodded. "That's because you've been there." She looked at me quiet for a moment. "I guess I have." The Monday before Thanksgiving, Delilah stopped by my place on her way home from class. She had a soft envelope in her hand. "I want to show you something," she said, handing it to me. Inside was a certified copy of a name change form. Delilah Weston, Delilah Bailey. "I filed it this morning," she said. "It's official now." I traced the lines of the form. "You ready for that?" She nodded. "I wanted something clean, something mine, something that still connects me to the part of our family that never tried to control me." We stood there for a long moment. Then she added, "And I figured, we're still sisters, even with different last names." "Of course we are," I said. Thanksgiving came quietly that year. Mark invited us to join his family up in Hood River. It wasn't extravagant, just food, board games, and a short hike after dinner. Delilah helped set the table with Mark's younger sister. I caught her laughing at something his mother said while arranging the dessert tray. Later, we sat around a fire pit in the backyard, wrapped in borrowed sweaters. Someone passed around mugs of cider. Mark's father turned to Delilah and said, "We're glad you're here." She looked down for a second, then smiled. "Me too." On the drive back, she rested her head against the window, watching the trees blur past. When we got close to town, she spoke without turning. "I've been thinking about seeing Mom." I didn't interrupt. "I don't know if I'm ready to sit across from her, but maybe I could write." "You should do what brings you peace," I said. A few days later, she dropped a letter in the mail. Just a few pages typed, but full of truth. She didn't soften the past. She didn't ask for anything. But she did say she was moving forward and hoped Mom would too. The reply came 2 weeks later. Delilah opened it in my kitchen, her hand steady, even as she unfolded the page. She apologized, she said, not for everything, but she said she regretted putting me in that position. She looked up. She also asked about you. I poured coffee for us both. "I'm not there yet." I told her that, Delilah said. I told her she'd have to respect that. She tucked the letter back into the envelope and set it aside. "Thank you," she said softly, "for giving me space, and for stepping into that ballroom when I wouldn't have known how." I reached over and squeezed her hand. Sometimes that's what sisters do. In early December, Delilah hosted her first small gathering at the new apartment, just a few friends from the Veterans Center, Mark, Marjorie, and me. She made chili, set out mismatched mugs for cider, and played music low on a Bluetooth speaker. It wasn't polished, but it was warm. Mark arrived with a basket of homemade cornbread from his mom. As he handed it to Delilah, he kissed her cheek and said, "Mom says this means she officially approves." Delilah laughed, setting the basket on the counter. "Tell her I approve of her cornbread, too." Later, while she rinsed dishes and I dried, she paused with a plate in her hand. "Do you think this feels too normal?" she asked. "Too easy." "Normal doesn't mean you've forgotten," I said. "It just means you're healing." She nodded, then placed the plate gently in the rack. The conversation around the table had turned to weekend plans. Mark mentioned a cabin his family rented every year for New Year's. He looked at both of us. "You're both invited," he said. "It's nothing fancy, just good food and no pressure." Delilah glanced my way, waiting for my read. I nodded. "I think that sounds perfect." In the days leading up to Christmas, we each got busy. I was finalizing documents for a new assignment. Delilah was finishing up her first semester and applying for spring financial aid. She'd started working part-time at the Veterans Center, helping streamline intake forms. Then the morning after Christmas, we got word our father's sentencing hearing had been scheduled for the following week. Delilah went alone. She said she needed to face it herself. I watched her pull on a simple gray coat and knot a scarf beneath her collar. "He might say things that don't make sense," I told her, "but you don't need to explain yourself. Just listen. Then walk out." She nodded. "I've practiced that already. Walking away." She returned that evening quiet but composed. She dropped her purse by the couch and kicked off her flats. "He apologized," she said. "Not directly, but in his statement to the court. He said he never meant to put me at risk." She sat beside me and folded her hands in her lap. "I think he believes," that she continued. "I think he truly thinks everything he did was for our future. But it wasn't." We sat for a moment, the heater humming in the background. I don't need him to admit everything, she said. I just needed to know that I can live without his version of the truth. Mark's family cabin sat along the edge of a frozen lake tucked behind tall pines and a long gravel driveway. We arrived the day before New Year's Eve. There was no cell signal and no one seemed to mind. We helped prep meals, played board games at the long wooden table, and walked short trails packed with fresh snow. Delilah and Mark moved easily together, quiet glances, shared gloves, whispered jokes. One afternoon, while the others rested inside, the three of us stood outside on the back porch wrapped in blankets. Delilah turned to me. "You know what I'm thinking. What's that? I want to pursue this graduate school, this work, but I don't want to carry Weston with me. Not just legally. I don't want to answer to it anymore." She paused. "What if I used Bailey permanently?" I nodded slowly. "I think that would suit you just fine." "Delilah Bailey," she said, testing it aloud. "Not a symbol, just me." She smiled soft and real. The following week, we returned to Portland and dove into the small but necessary tasks: paperwork, frozen pipes, leftover mail. We also finalized the last major decision we'd delayed for months: the house in West Hills. Delilah and I met with the attorney handling restitution and signed the agreement to release the property for sale. The funds would help repay victims from the arms dealing case. We didn't visit the house again. Neither of us wanted to. Instead, we invited Marjorie and Mark for dinner at my apartment on Christmas Eve. Delilah lit candles and brought out a box of handwritten place cards she'd made for fun. At the table, she stood and lifted her glass. "To new beginnings," she said, "and to the freedom that comes from facing hard truths." Marjorie raised her glass. "To women who choose clarity over comfort." Mark added, "and to chosen families." We clinked glasses and sat down to eat. Later, while we cleaned up, Delilah turned to me at the sink. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "The way it happened, I mean. Exposing everything, knowing what it would cost." I paused before answering. "I regret that it hurt you," I said. "I regret that it happened at all. But no, I don't regret standing up." She nodded slowly. "I'm glad you did." We finished drying the last plate. Then she picked up her phone and read a message silently. "Mark's mom wants us to join them for New Year's again next year," she said. "She said we're officially part of the family now." She glanced over at me. "Feels strange, but it also feels right." I smiled. "You've earned it." Delilah leaned against the counter, arms crossed, and looked around the apartment, the same space where she'd once cried herself to sleep, unsure of what came next. "I think this is what family's supposed to be," she said. "Not what we were born into, but what we build." The week before spring semester started, Delilah invited me over to her apartment for dinner. She'd made lemon chicken with roasted vegetables, the kind of meal our mother used to insist belonged on formal china. We ate off thrifted ceramic plates with chipped edges and mismatched forks. It felt better that way. After dinner, we sat on the floor in front of the couch, passing a bowl of clementines back and forth. She reached into a side drawer and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "It's from Mom," she said. "Second letter this month." I waited while she opened it. Her eyes scanned the page and she gave a small nod. "She's trying. Not all the way. But she said she's proud I stayed truthful. That she understands why I changed my name." She set the letter aside. "That might be all I ever get from her. And I think I'm okay with that." A few days later, I helped her set up a desk in the corner of the apartment. She wanted a place just for schoolwork, separate from where she slept, cooked, or made phone calls. As we unpacked the box of supplies, she handed me a photo in a simple wooden frame. It was the two of us at the cabin, over New Year's, wrapped in blankets, and holding mugs, laughing at something just outside the frame. "I want this near me," she said, "to remind me of what survived." The night before classes began, she called me after dinner. Mark's mom sent over a care package, she said, laughing. "It's got highlighters, trail mix, and a blanket that smells like her dryer sheets." I smiled into the phone. "Sounds like she's adopted you." "I think I've adopted her right back." The trial ended quietly months later. Our father accepted a plea deal, 8 years with the possibility of parole. Our mother would serve a shorter sentence starting later that year. Delilah didn't attend the final hearing. She didn't need to. Instead, she spent the afternoon leading a workshop for veterans on resume writing. That evening, she came by my place with takeout and a bottle of wine. She didn't mention the case. She didn't have to. Before she left, she hugged me at the door. "I wouldn't have made it through any of this without you," she said. "I know I've said it before, but I mean it differently every time." "You would have found your way," I said. "Maybe, but it wouldn't have looked like this." She stepped out into the hallway, then turned back once more. "I'm thinking about applying to that VA liaison program," she said, "the one that works with families of deployed service members." I nodded. "You'd be good at it." As the door closed, I stood there for a moment, listening to the soft click of her footsteps fading down the hall. She'd walked into that ballroom thinking she knew what her life was. She walked out with nothing but the truth. And somehow she turned that truth into a foundation. Not just for herself, but for the people she chose to stand beside. If you've ever had to start over, if you've ever had to walk away from the life that was handed to you in order to build the one that fits, then you understand what she did. Thanks for walking this journey with us. And if this story brought something forward in your own heart, I hope you'll share it or simply sit with it a while. You're not alone.